That was the longest period I was with the government. And at the age of 40, in 2008, so you can do your math in terms of how old I am right now, I decided that I wanted to go out and start something new. But what was missing was that in between the pre-seed, seed, and the Series A, there's that gap.
Hello guys, in this video we will be interviewing the founder of PitchIn. So PitchIn's Malaysia's largest equity crowdfunding platform, and in this video we will be interviewing the founder on how he ended up starting this platform and how he came up with the idea after working long years for the government. He also runs an accelerator in Malaysia, so in that sense it's going to be very insightful to actually understand the ecosystem here in the funding landscape here in Malaysia.
So now we have Sam. He's the founder of PitchIn, and first of all, I'd love to know your background on how you ended up starting this startup. Maybe a brief explanation of your service.
Cool, thanks. So my name is Sam Shafi'i. I am the co-founder and CEO of PitchIn, and also Watchtower in France, which is the technology accelerator. But how I got myself into this is quite interesting. I'm a lawyer by training. I was a former prosecutor in the 90s, in the early 90s. So I was prosecuting people, especially those who we allege committed commercial crime cases. So I stayed for 5 years there, followed by a stint in the Securities Commission. That was for 3 years. I then spent another 8 years in the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission. That was the longest period I was with the government. And at the age of 40, in 2008, so you can do your math in terms of how old I am right now, I decided that I wanted to go out and start something new. And I think it was mainly me wanting to see how far I can go in terms of building my own companies as compared to a comfortable life in the government sector. So I've been on my own since 2008. The first thing I did was to start a venture building company where we tried to venture build ideas that me and my co-founder thought was cool, and this was 2010. One of it. So we did 4 or 5 companies. All of them failed, apart from PitchIn. Right. So PitchIn was the only venture build company that we ourselves ran. All the other 4 companies, we actually got people to actually run it. Then we realized that after a few months, those people that we actually we brought in to run those companies, then realized that it's not my company. Sam and Cash is really running the company and telling us what to do. And I think that's where their interest went down. And the companies also then folded. And that's where then we pivoted Watchtower in France, or WTF, to become an accelerator company. So rather than try to build companies from ground zero ourselves, we thought let's just invest in really smart founders. And that's where in 2015 we started our first batch of companies that came into Watchtower in France. We've done 8 batches already. I think we invested 50 plus companies, close to 60 companies. But at the same time, when we were running those accelerator program, and we invested very early stage, like PowerPoint stage, and after receiving our money, that's where we saw this gap between pre-seed and seed towards Series A. And I think all of us have seen this popular graphic, the valley of the death for the startups. That's where a lot of the companies fail. They receive money during pre-seed and seed, then took some time to validate, but ran out of money before they could actually show validation and before they could raise Series A. So we thought there's this gap there. And that's when we decided that looking at the local structure in terms of the ecosystem, right? So in Malaysia, I think we have quite a healthy ecosystem. For every stage of the company, that there are funders out there. In the early stage, you got your grants, which is money coming in from government agencies. You got accelerator programs and whatnot, right? Then you got your VCs who will then do your Series A, B, and so forth. But what was missing was that in between the pre-seed, seed, and the Series A, there's that gap. And that's when we look around what's happening, especially in the UK. At that time it was Crowdcube, Seeders, and one more platform which I forgot now. I think those three platforms were doing quite a fantastic job in terms of filling that gap. And we thought, why can't we do it here in Malaysia, right? So as I mentioned earlier, we started PitchIn as a reward crowdfunding platform first. We then pivoted to become an equity crowdfunding platform. But in the early days of starting that reward crowdfunding platform was very important, because by the time the government thought that equity crowdfunding could address that gap, and they looked at the local market and they saw PitchIn as at that time the only platform that was doing crowdfunding. And we were then invited to the office to really brainstorm and discuss what potentially this framework could be. So in the early days of building the framework for equity crowdfunding in Malaysia, we were actually part of it. So very actively coming up with a framework together with the regulators. 2015, we PitchIn together with five other platforms were given the license to do so, and the first campaign for equity crowdfunding launched late of 2015. We PitchIn only went live in 2016, so we were one of the last platforms to actually go live. But we eventually, now 6 years after that, we are now the largest platform in Malaysia. I think we're roughly around 55 or 60% market share. But yeah, the interest of starting PitchIn basically came about from our own experience investing in early stage company, seeing the majority of this company struggling to raise their Series A.
Why were you always into this, like the supporting side of like the startups? Like, how did you end up like starting the accelerator at the
So I think by nature, right? By nature, I'm a sort of person that wants to do a lot of things at the same time. It's just by nature. I'm just curious. I'm just intrigued, and I want to do a lot of things at the same time. And I know I can't, right? And in my head at the time, there were so many things I want to do, especially in 2008, 2010, early days in terms of startup ecosystem in Malaysia. Again, I'm not sure whether you're familiar. In the late 90s, there was hardly an ecosystem in Malaysia, right, for startups. But I read a lot of magazines at that time. I'm not sure some of your viewers are familiar with Upside, Industry Standard, Red Herring, Wyatt, who's still running, Fast Company is still running. So I read a lot of those magazines, right? And every time I read those magazines, right, my head is working overtime in terms of what we can do using technology, right, to really, enrich the ecosystem. So when I decided to leave the government, the main focus was to try to set up so many companies based on all these cool ideas, which I thought was cool at that time, right? But like I mentioned early on, not all of them came about. So I thought that the best way for me to be involved in this ecosystem is to really back really smart people, so that I can live within them. Those ideas that they have, I can live within them, right, and really help them to grow. So I'm living their life by true investment, and that's how I started. And I think setting up PitchIn is also another way for me to be involved in whatever these entrepreneurs are trying to do. Again, trying to live what I can't, i.e. doing it myself, but living it through them. I think that's really why this interest into either setting up Watchtower and Friends to invest, or PitchIn as a platform to help these founders to raise funding. Yeah.
I can really relate, because like I used to work for the government and I was supporting startups too, and and I really don't want to pick any industries. I like seeing everything.
That's right.
So I really understand. And but at the same time, like I wanted to ask, like you were working for the government for like a long time, and you were in your 40s.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, didn't you think it was like a risk to like quit, and like how did you feel like when you quit and like start your own company?
Yeah, so it was a major risk, right? After 15 years in the government, comfortable, quite senior already in the government, taking that decision at the age of 40, right, and starting all over was not an easy decision to do, but I planned it in a way that when I decided to actually quit, I had put aside money. Just like any startup, you put aside some money in terms of your runaway, right? So I had money put aside as my life runaway until I find something that I can be good at. So even though it was a risk, but I calculated it so that it would be me just diving into the unknown. But one thing, which I realized when I always tell my friends, or some of my junior friends who are thinking of actually leaving the government, right? And I told them what I realized after leaving the government and starting my own thing, and it's really, there's so many things that you can do, right? It's really asking yourself whether you have 24 hours to do everything, right? And then, of course, for you to pick what you think you are good at, and the freedom to do what you want to do, and being good at it, it's so captivating for me, right? And that's why I now, after how many years on my own, I tell myself and I tell my friends that I should have done this much earlier. In fact, I think if I had left much earlier, I think we will be speaking differently right now. But I left too late at the age of 40, right? I should have done it much more earlier. So quitting was something not easy, but like I said, I was prepared for it. So even if I did not succeed in what I want to do, I think there's always this fallback. Being a lawyer, I can just always easily set up my own legal firm and start going back to do law, right? But I've not gone back to do law for the last how many years? 2018, 15 years? Yeah. So I've not done anything remotely close to legal work since then. So right now my focus is just investing and helping companies to raise funding. Yeah.
That's just truly inspiring.
Yeah.
I mean, so like back in the days, was entrepreneurship that common here in Malaysia? Was it pretty rare to like quit your job and just start your own company?
It's pretty rare, especially when you reach a senior level, right, in the government, right? It's pretty rare. And I think it's much more rarer when you go out without a real plan. So when I came out, it was not really a real plan for me to set up a company, right, or even join a company, or me with a couple of friends joining together. It was just me alone, right? I still remember there were 3 of us working in the same government offices. But every day after office and having coffee and tea, and we would talk about setting our own businesses and whatnot. And when the day came, it was me alone who left, right? The other 2 stick on, right? Again, not sure, maybe the family was against it, right? But I thought I had to challenge myself. Yeah.
Do you think like the funding landscape has developed?
Oh yeah,
throughout the years?
much so. It has. I think, and I always tell people this, in Malaysia, I think the funding landscape in Malaysia is probably one of the matured ones, apart from Singapore, right? And other than that, like I said, for every stage of any company, whether it's idea, when you're trying to validate, you're trying to scale, and so forth, there are funders out there. And yet a lot of people, and again, this happens everywhere, right? A lot of people still complain that there are not investors, they don't want to invest in my company, and most of the time, I think the hard truth is that you have to look yourself or put your company into the mirror and ask whether is this business investable or not, right? Because it's not really a lack of funding or lack of people that want to invest. It's whether is your business investable or fundable, right? I think that's where I think a lot of discussion I would think, or a lot of work should be focused on. I think business in terms of the funders, it could be local, it could be international, it could be a foreign investor. I think everyone is looking for a good deal. And those days of, okay, in 2010, I still remember speaking to this Silicon Valley investor, right? And he told me that if you want our money, you got to be based in Silicon Valley, right? I don't see myself investing in anything outside of the valley, right? But now in 2020, now you see everywhere, right? Even funds in the valley are investing in South Asia and vice versa, right? So I don't think right now it matters where you are. I think if you can actually build a good company and it appeals to investors, they will come, right? So I always tell people that don't chase after money, build a great company and money will come to you, right? I think if you're so much focused on chasing money, and that's where you probably drop the ball in terms of building your own businesses, right? So I always tell people that invest in, or people that's fundraising on PitchIn, is that have you built something that is investable for other people to come in? If you're not, then you're probably not ready to raise funding in the first place.
Okay, so in the next video, we will discuss further on the startup landscape in Malaysia right now, also on their future goals of PitchIn and their ambitions on expanding globally.